Well, Bronco Nation, I told you this was going to be a fight. I told you in my game preview that this was not going to be easy. Take the 3-7 record for Nevada, throw it out the window. Take the number 12 ranking. It doesn't matter. This is a rivalry game. Anyone doubting the rivalry status of this matchup after tonight's performance, after the chippiness on the field, the interactions of the head coaches, and the closeness of this matchup, should be doubting no longer, because this game came down to the wire, because this is a rivalry game, and it doesn't matter how good one program is and how bad the other one is. The BYU top 10, I got the game on here in the background. They are losing 21-10 against a Utah team that has nothing left to play for. They're not going to the Big 12 championship game. They have 4 wins on the season. Their hopes for the postseason, besides a meaningless bowl game, are over, and they're beating BYU right now because that's what rivalries do. They bring out the best in both teams, and they make the environment the toughest possible environment to win in, no matter who you are, and especially if you're the team coming in with a little bit of an edge. That's what rivalry games do. And Boise State walks away from a Nevada game 28-21. Now, there was a lot of score predictions out there. Again, I said anybody predicting a massive win, that this was going to be an easy blowout win, was going to be disappointed. And pretty much every single person making score predictions this week was disappointed. I do, however, have one person to shout out. Now, this person was very, very close to the final score, within a field goal of the final score. And it's really a crushing blow here because he actually beat my wife out by 3 points. So unfortunately, not going to be able to shout you out this week. But the Demon Hamster, that's hamster without a T, Demon Hamster, that Demon Hamster, that's hamster without a P, so TheDemonHamster. His score prediction for this game, 31-21. I mean, well done. You beat Vegas. You beat all of the sports pundits out there. You beat 95% of Bronco Nation. Pretty much you, my wife, and myself were the only ones who were even close on this game. Of course, I'm predicting a 37-21 point win for Boise State. So just about a score off for Boise and nailing the Nevada game. But outstanding job. And you weren't just right on the score prediction. You also got Ashton Jeanty's overall yards pretty close. You predicted 220 yards of rushing for Ashton Jeanty and 2 touchdowns. And he had 221 yards overall receiving and rushing and 3 touchdowns. So almost nailing that. A little bit off on the Madsen prediction. And we're going to talk about that. We're going to look through the offense, the defense, the special teams. We are going to be fair and honest. There was a lot of bad. Again, rivalry game. It's going to bring out the very best in Nevada, and the pressure is on for the team on top. Boise State has been in this position before. They've been in this position. They have gone up against the Wolfpack when a national championship potential was on the line, when a ranking in the top 10 was on the line, when they had everything to play for, and they lost. Well, not tonight. Tonight, Boise State walks away with a win, and I have to tell you right now that I am pumped up because, yes, this wasn't a blowout win. Boise State might drop a spot. They might. They had some teams lose ahead of them, and if BYU goes down, that'll be another team cleared out of the way. But this was not the performance that you wanted on national television. The biggest game of the year for Boise State from a TV slot and time slot standpoint. This was not the performance that you wanted. This is not going to win over voters for you for either the Heisman or for the CFP. Now, Jeanty's performance being so key, he might get some points towards him for the Heisman there. But as far as CFP goes, this is not going to get you ranking slots. This wasn't the game you wanted. I'm not pumped up because Boise State only won by a touchdown, but I'm pumped up because Boise State walks away with a win versus a Nevada team that they almost lost against. And the reason that I'm pumped up is because we were here before. So many people have talked about how this season feels like a return to the golden era, right? That this season feels like a return to the Doug Martin, Kellen Moore days. And yeah, obviously that passing game for Boise State back in Kellen Moore days was definitely a lot more lethal. But the overall feeling, the glory days, the 2009 through 2011 days, that's what it's felt like for large portions of this season. You're going up and playing tough, basically doing everything except eke out the win versus top 10 #1 programs like Oregon, where you had every opportunity to, and a couple mistakes lost you the game. That's what Boise State teams of old would have done, going out and destroying, demolishing your your supposed peer, but conference competition by 30+ points, scoring 50, 60 on the blue. That's what Boise State used to do. But you know what they also used to do during that golden era? They used to play it tight against Nevada. They did. And one of those times, I mean, 2008 was close, 2009 was close, 2007 was close. Every game with Kaepernick there was close. And 2010 wasn't just close, but we said everything on the line, and they didn't win. But they did tonight. And so I have the emotional surge of 15 years of waiting for a moment when Boise State had everything on the line to come up against Nevada and win in a close game. And it happened tonight. And Boise State keeps its CFP goals alive. Their season is as much of a contention for the CFP as it was before the game began. There's nobody in the group of 5 that can compete with them. And they are still well on track, especially depending on what happens with this BYU game here, to be able to find a way into not just the CFP, but potentially being inside of those top 5 conference champions, either getting a bye or a chance to host a game. And Boise State walks away with a win. So before we get into some big negatives, this was a bad game in a lot of areas. None of these position groups are going to get a really strong grade. Just a little bit of a sneak peek here. But before we start looking at some negatives, and we will also touch on the positives, it is always 100% fair and balanced analysis on this channel. But before we start looking at a lot of negatives that are going to have to be combed through, it is important to remember that this was a win in a game that Boise State definitely could have won, and for a large portion of the game looked like they had a chance to lose this game, and they didn't. They walk away with a win, and that at the end of the day is what's most important. So let's get into offense, defense, special teams, and also look at my keys to the game, how Boise State performed against those as we go throughout. I want to be able to know your thoughts on this matchup. I'm sure the fan base is not thrilled because, again, most of you were expecting this to be a massive win. So considering that this was a close win, I'm sure there are a lot of negative views and opinions about this game, and I want to have the conversation with each of you. All of those opinions are 100% valid. We should expect Boise State to crush a 3-7 program here, even in a rivalry game. This should not have been this close. Boise State is so much better across the board than this UNR team. This should not have been this close. So every negative thought that you have is 100% valid. I want to have those conversations with you in the comments below as we go throughout this video. So looking first at the offense for Boise State, Madsen's taken a lot of heat this year. I think undeservedly so. I think that for the most part, he has played very well. The last 3 games, he's played exceptionally well. Last week was his best game of the season. His most negative game of the year was the Oregon game. There were a lot of drops in that one. It was a very tough defense, and the play calling was suspect. So I have been, because I am a fan of facts, because I'm a fan of actual statistics, not potential statistics like near picks that nobody keeps track of, because there's a lot of elements that go into that, and every quarterback has near picks. Just Madsen's get remembered a lot more than other quarterbacks. Because I'm a fan of actual facts and not just emotion or conjecture, I have been a quote-unquote Maddox Madsen defender this season. And again, I'm just defending the facts across the table. I'm not biased in any way there. I'm looking just across honest analysis across the board. However, I have been, in that sense, a Maddox Madsen defender. But I will be the first to tell you tonight, this was not a good game. This was one of the worst games that he's played this season. 9 of 20, 45% completion percentage, 119 yards passing, 1 touchdown, and to his credit, 1 pick. However, While the other near picks that fans go into are mostly irrelevant, tonight he had 2 balls in the hands, 2 additional balls, in addition to the first pick, 2 passes in the hands of defenders that he was saved by some circumstances, one of which I think was an unfair call. So he had 1 interception that was right in the hands of the defender, across the middle of the field. Shouldn't have been thrown. Bad decision. He had a couple bad decisions tonight, and that kind of shows you the rivalry nature, the pressure that was on this game. The players certainly felt it, and the eyes, of course, of the nation as well. The pressure that being on national broadcast. But he had he had several bad decisions tonight. One of those was throwing a pick across the middle that was intercepted. The referees ruled a defensive pass interference. That was a bad call. I mean, Chase Penry basically ran into the defender there. That should have been a pick, but it's not. Then also down towards the goal line, and we're going to go into this a little bit more, but just touching off on this subject as a whole, he threw an interception right at the goal line that ended up being ruled incomplete. Now, that ruling, 100% valid. In that case, he was not saved by the referee. It was very, very clear on replay. And, I mean, I know some people watching the stands said that Nevada got robbed there. However, people watching on TV, which is a better vantage point in a large aspect, and especially for this case, the camera angles clearly showed ball was moving as he went to secure the ball out of bounds. Didn't really fully secure it until he was out of bounds. So saved in that sense that the Nevada receiver had an opportunity to possess that ball. Didn't. He mistake on his end, was unable to possess the pass, and ruled interception on the field, overturned by replay. But that stat really, if you're looking at quarterback decision making in this game, and not just potential, but actual balls in the hands of receivers, that should be 1 touchdown, 3 interceptions. However, I've touched on the negatives. I have. Maddox Matson also had some very, very high moments in this game as well. And one of those was continuing to exploit his ability to run the football. 8 rushes, 58 yards, 7.3 yard average. This was a big game for him rushing-wise. There was a drive in particular there to start off the second half where his legs were key to getting Boise State to punch it in. And we're going to go through the drives. I don't always go drive by drive per se. Sometimes I'll do a little bit of a summary. But I think it's important in this game to understand the ups and downs and also to be able to assess properly the positives and the negatives in their context to go through the drive. So we won't do that for the defense necessarily, but for offense, we will go drive by drive through this matchup. But Maddox Matson, up and down performance. Those negatives are what's going to stand out. That's what people are going to see. But he also played a major role in winning this game for Boise State. Had some big, big moments in the passing game. Those were fewer than they have been in the past. But he also had some big plays in the rushing game and was a key contributor to a 1-possession win here for Boise State. However, the reason that Boise State won this game, Ashton Jeanty. Ashton Jeanty had a huge game in this matchup, and I think that it was one of his best of the season. We've said that a few times this year, but the consistency offensively. Yeah, there were a few times that Nevada was able to stop him. There were a few times here and there where they were able to get him for a negative yard loss, or they stopped him at the line. A lot of inside runs that were not overall effective for him. However, consistently across the board, he was breaking the 6-yard carry through contact, the 10-yard gain, the 20-plus. He had several 20-plus yard runs in this game. It was a very strong, consistent performance against a Nevada defense that came ready to play. Choate had this team set up. It wasn't like versus San Diego State where they were only attempting to stop the run. They were part of the reason the passing game struggled in this game is that Choate had this defense ready to perform. I said they weren't going to just focus in on one element. Choate wasn't going to do that. He wanted to prove that Nevada could compete at Boise State's level, and he did that today. And so this was a very, very strong Nevada performance. This was a very, very focused UNR team that came up against Boise State, and they did at times have Ashton Jeanty's number. However, this wasn't like the San Diego State game where, kind of force-feeding him to just get to, 140-plus yards, 150-plus yards rushing in that matchup, or 150 39, wherever he ended up having that game. This wasn't like that game. It wasn't like the UNLV game where a couple of long runs where he gets most of his yards. That's not what this game was. Ashton Jeanty did have several long breaking runs, but consistently, and especially in the second half, he was going out in this game, and it wasn't garbage time. He was needed all the way through, and he was consistently going out and getting 10 yards, 7 yards. He averaged on this game 6.1 yard average per carry, and this was a very consistent performance. 209 yards rushing, 3 touchdowns, 221 yards overall with those 12 yards receiving. A massive game. 106 yards in the first half, 103 yards in the second half, and he obviously is still not 100%. He did have a fumble. This is his first fumble of the season that was recovered against him. He had a fumble versus Hawaii that was not recovered. So second fumble of the season, first one recovered against him. But the reason is because it was in that arm that has the brace on it. And unfortunately, coming into the middle there, just didn't quite wrap up. A little bit of ball exposure and it got popped out. His arm isn't in that brace. He probably doesn't fumble. And so he still is not. And I want to make that very, very clear. He looked better in this game. He had a lot more energy, a lot more pep in his step, a lot more next level speed that we're used to seeing him, that power through run that he kind of seemed to be a little bit off on last week versus San Jose and definitely the week before that versus UNLV. However, he's still not 100%. That injury is still slowing him down to a certain level, and he still had 200 plus yards rushing in this game. The most shocking stat before we go through drive by drive, the most shocking stat, however, in this game is that only 3 players had receptions. I'm going to have to go back through the record books, look at the games of the past, but I think that is the first time, and it's the first time that I've noticed it as a fan, that only 3 players have caught the passes and only one wide receiver caught a ball today. That is shocking. It definitely shows the level of defensive preparedness that Jeff Choate came into this game with. Again, not just trying to stop Ashton Jeanty, selling out only against the run like he did versus San Diego State. Not he, but San Diego State did against Boise State. That comment was made by the announcers that they were just committing to stopping the run game. That's 100% false. This was not a game where Nevada was just stacking the box. There were some very tough coverages. That's part of the reason that this was a poor performance for Max Madsen. But there were some very tough coverages that Max Madsen was throwing into. They weren't just wide open, for the most part, breaking receivers across the board. That was a very balanced defensive effort from Jeff Choate. Came ready to play and to play up to Boise State's level, not just to stop one element. So, again, the fact that even with a balanced system, even with having to go up against Ashton Jeanty, and having to consider what Ashton Jeanty brings in the backfield, Boise State only had 3 players catch passes. It is a massive credit, first off, to the defensive look that UNR presented today in this game. But overall, Matt Lauder, 5 receptions, 161 yards, not 100. Matt Lauder, 5 receptions, 61 yards, and a touchdown, definitely the number 1 target today, 12.2 yard average there. Then Cam Camper, the only receiver. If there's going to be one receiver you're going to get the ball to, Cam Camper is probably going to be the one. 2 receptions for 46 yards. A lot of that coming on one long deep ball, a 38-yard deep ball that happened right there at the start of the first half. And then Ashton Jeanty had the other 12 yards receiving. That's the entire receiving wrap-up. So looking at this game overall, it started off really well. 2 back-to-back drives for Boise State, ending in touchdowns, coming in a variety of ways. Boise State looking very dominant, looking good. They weren't throwing a lot of balls to receivers, but they were still looking good overall. I think Madsen was like 4 of 7 through those first 2 drives. Most of those passes going to Lauder, maybe 3 of 6, something like that. But overall, Madsen looking good, Jeanty looking dominant. Boise State opens up 3 straight runs to Ashton Jeanty, and then they take it out and throw a pass to Lauder, which was not a great throw, a little off target. Lauder had to come back to get it behind him. Great catch by his part. And then Ashton Jeanty runs it in for a touchdown, and they call a hold on Austin Bolt. Just the referees in this game were terrible. It was really funny seeing the Fox correspondents, the Fox analysts watching this game, the broadcast crew, that's what I'm trying to say, the broadcasters watching this game, because they were appalled by what they saw out of this Mountain West refereeing crew. And I just got to say, hey, welcome to Mountain West football, because this is a nightly occurrence. The Mountain West shares their referees with the Big 12. The worst referees in the entire country, without a doubt. I watch football games across every time zone, every conference, and there's some bad ones. Like, ACC crews have been rigging it for Miami all season long. I know the referees are just absolutely devastated by their loss today. However, this is not like it's just across the board. It's just in that one case, there's bias. But across the board, and it wasn't biased towards one team or the other, there were some bad calls in Boise State's favor. There were some bad calls in Nevada's favor. This was just a terribly refereed game, and that was one of them. Holding call that was not holding at all. It was actually the defender pulled Austin Bolt to the ground. Austin Bolt was trying to block him. The defender fell over and grabbed Austin Bolt and pulled him down on top of him. So just a terrible call. Robbed Ashton Jeanty of what would have been his 4th touchdown overall on the game, his first one to start the matchup, and ended up being a pass to Louder, which was a beautiful play call. Probably one of the best, if not the second best passes, and definitely the best passing play call of the night. A underneath screen back across, so all offense is running to the right, underneath screen back across to Matt Louder, who runs it in for a touchdown. Brilliant play call in the red zone, especially after a holding penalty, to just take it back in for a touchdown right there. And then second drive, Ashton Jeanty breaks one right off the bat. Second drive, 46-yard run, breaking outside. It was an inside run, but it was on the outside there of the left tackle. Breaks it for a long one, 46 yards, and then just powers it in, as Ashton Jeanty does. Powers it in for a touchdown. There's actually a fan in the Bronco Nation Updates group who played a matchup on this game on NCAA Football 25 and took a photo, said, "Here's my prediction for the game," and showed Ashton Jeanty just stiff arming a Nevada player as he falls over the end zone. And it looked exactly like this play. So, I mean, just brilliant forecasting there. Brilliant prediction. So Ashton Jeanty runs it in for a touchdown, and Boise State fans are feeling comfortable. I'm sitting there thinking, man, I called this one all wrong. This isn't going to be close. This isn't going to be a fight. Those 50 plus, and I'm happy. Like, I didn't want to be right. Just, by the way, just as a rule across the board, if you ever hear me predict a close win and not a dominant win, or in some cases I do predict losses, if I predict a loss, just know, and it goes without saying, but just know that I am not rooting for the score that I predict in those circumstances. I am rooting with everything in me to be wrong. And coming into this game, I was sitting pretty comfortable. I thought, you know what, this is a rivalry game, but there's times when Boise State just blows out Nevada, and this is going to be one of those, and it's going to be great, and I'm going to love it, because I love it when Boise State just destroys that team, and this is going to be one of those. And then the third drive happened. Mags Matson, under pressure, throws a ball high. He does have an open receiver. I believe it's Louder, again, does have an open receiver, but under pressure, overthrows the ball right into the hands of the waiting safety. And Boise State turns the ball over on that play. I believe on that one that Nevada's able to go down and score on that. And then drive number 3. So they may have forced a punt, but regardless, there was a momentum shift. I don't remember exactly if they ended up scoring on that drive or not. I believe they may have actually forced a punt on that. It would have been a drive number 3. So they may have forced a punt on that. However, not what you want to see. And Nevada really kind of keyed off on that. The game changed. And the second drive, if there wasn't a momentum shift after that drive number 3, the drive after it certainly shifted the momentum towards a game that Boise State was not going to just come in and blow out. That's the thing with rivalry games. You can go out and destroy a rifle. You definitely can, and it feels good when you do. But if you're the team that's on top, and you're coming up against a program with a chip on their shoulder and nothing left to lose, and you are their Super Bowl, and you give them a spark, if you give them an opportunity to stick around a little longer than they should, 9 times out of 10, that game is going to come down to the wire, and you might lose. Boise State versus Nevada, 2010, they were up by 3 scores. The first quarter plus of that game, it looked like Boise State was going to do what they'd done to every other team. And then Nevada got a touchdown. And then they got another touchdown. And then they came back and the score shifted back and forth and it ended the way that we knew it ended. And when I saw the second turnover, a rare fumble by Ashton Jeanty, I knew I knew that the momentum was shifting in this game. And again, it's just another one of those familiar feelings back to what I felt before. It came back to me. And then it's another reason why I'm so pumped up about this win, because it's almost like closure. Boise State has fully made up for that missed opportunity, and they are on their way now past the roadblock they couldn't overcome. They did, and they're on their way up and up to the next opportunity here. But drive number 4, Ashton Jeanty, up the middle, fumbles the football. And I believe on that one, for sure, that Nevada did end up going down and scoring on that. So drive number 5, Boise State ends up having to punt. Maddox Madsen has a tip ball. Prince Strawn has a drop. I know that there's been games in the past where part of the reason that Maddox Madsen struggles because of the drops. Last week was a perfect example. There were at least 6 drops in that game. That was not the reason for the struggle in this one. Maddox Madsen just had a down game. Players have that sometimes, and I want to make it very, very clear that by saying Maddox Madsen had a bad game, this in no way justifies the perspective of the fan base coming into this game. He is not the quarterback that you see him as because he had one bad game. This was an off night. This was an anomaly to what he usually performs at, to what he usually puts up. This was a bad game, and I'm going to call out the negative. I'm also going to call out the positives that he had as well. And the Boise State fan base, as a large portion, they're only interested in remembering the negatives, and they're going to use this. They're going to forget about last week where he had a career game. That game's not going to exist in their mind. All they're going to go is, well, this justifies it. He should be removed. Malachi Nelson should be the starter because of this game. I was already seeing it on Twitter. It's an absolutely ridiculous position to hold. Nobody's going to be looking at Ashton Jeanty's fumble and going, hey, he needs to be removed from the game. Now, obviously, he was able to make up for it. But it's a similar situation. Max Madsen's made mistakes in the past. He's made up for it, but fans only remember the mistake. It's a perspective that is uniquely reserved for Maddox Madsen in the fan base. No other player in Boise State history has been treated by this, and it's absolutely atrocious. He will more than make up for this the next game, and he doesn't really need to, because this is an anomaly in his performance that is not reflective of what he has done this season, but I'm sure he'll be motivated too. However, that drive number 5, Prince Strawn does drop a pass as one of the few times that it was a mistake by another player. Max Madsen wasn't just making mistakes by himself in this one. Perfect throw. Prince Strawn, a little bit high, but Prince Strawn had it in both hands. It's well within his catch radius. Drops the pass. Boise State has to punt. And then they had to punt again. And Boise State came into halftime tied up against a Nevada team. And again, you give them that opportunity. They're going to come out the second half, and they're going to give you a battle. And it was all the way. Boise State now came out of the first half. They came out of the first half in a very shaky way. Special teams. Boise State did a pretty good job in the first half of special teams. Second half was a disaster, and we'll talk about that here momentarily. It was a disaster. Boise State came out of the first half, and they end up getting the ball at the 5-yard line for a reason that we'll go into here in a moment. But they get their ball at the 5-yard line. And there, again, momentum has shifted. Nevada has the momentum. They had the momentum coming into half, and they now have the momentum here. And Boise State could have allowed that momentum to shift against them, to drive them into poor decision-making, to feel the pressure and make mistakes. And Maddox Madsen didn't. Maddox Madsen led Boise State on a 95-yard drive from the 5-yard line to the end zone, and Boise State scored almost entirely because of Maddox Madsen. He rolls out, avoids a safety, forces a defensive pass interference call, similar to what we saw a couple weeks ago. This was versus UNLV in the 8-minute drive. Very, very similar to that kind of play. Rolls to the right side, throws a pass, defender is holding on the receiver, forces the flag, advances Boise State. He then throws a perfect, I mean absolutely beautiful 38-yard throw to Cam Camper. Only his receiver can get it. Cam Camper had a step. It wasn't a large one. Perfect throw. Brings Boise State down to the 30. Next play, Maddox Madsen off the option. That was a key, right? Using the option. Wasn't seen very much. Boise State did it a couple of times. But in this one, it worked. Maddox Madsen off the option, runs the ball for 18 yards down to the 10-yard line. Second play, runs the ball to the 1. Powers ahead. Attempts to get down at the 1. I think he got in, wasn't reviewed. He's down at the 1, and then Ashton Jeanty goes ahead for the go-ahead touchdown. That was Maddox Madsen that led that drive. Boise State didn't go into overtime in this game, which would have Not been a great feeling to see. Boise State did not go into overtime in this game because of Maddox Madsen on that drive. Now, they also didn't go into overtime and won this game because of Ashton Jeanty on the 3 touchdowns that he had. I'm not saying that Maddox Madsen is solely responsible. If you're going to put this win on primarily on one person, in this case, it is Ashton Jeanty. But in Maddox Madsen, for all of his mistakes, for all of his issues, in one of his worst games of his career, I would say arguably that, and I think he would probably tell you the same thing, statistically for sure, this was the worst game of his career. Even in that moment, even in all of that, and even all that negativity, he still came through for the win. And that's why he's the starter for Boise State. Because of drives like that, because of moments like that, he had many off performances in this game, but he also, when it mattered most, when all the momentum had shifted against them, Nevada scores first to start the game in the second half. This could have been a loss, but he took Boise State down for a drive there in the first half that changed the outlook of the game. Now, Boise State ends up having to punt on the next 2 games there. One of those is because of a missed pass interference call that forced a punt, a clear and obvious missed pass interference call. However, that was a little bit of a makeup because the drive before that, the second drive of the second half, Maddox Madsen has an interception. So he has that great first drive, then he also has that negative moment. Again, roller coaster up and down performance for him and the whole team here tonight. But he throws a interception into the hands of a Nevada defender. I believe it might have been the same safety as before. It definitely looked like it positionally. And it's overturned by a bad call by the referees. Here's a call that goes against Boise State, against Nevada in this case. That should have been interception. Nevada should have got the ball at the 30. Thankfully, Boise State is given the opportunity to punt the ball away, and they're able to get the ball down to the Nevada 8-yard line due to a great punt by James Ferguson Reynolds. But that should have been a drive. That should have been at the 30. And so there were some circumstances that led to this win as well. But a makeup call on the next drive there forces a punt. And then Boise State goes back to old reliable. Hey, your quarterback's having a down day. That's okay, because Ashton Jeanty, he can step up. And that's what makes this team so dangerous, because for the most part, the passing game is actually a pretty aggressive, pretty lethal threat. It's not, again, the Boise State passing attacks of the past. However, this is still, for the most part, a dangerous passing game, especially the second half of the season. However, Ashton Jeanty, you might bottle him up for some portions of this game, but he's eventually going to get to you. And I'm not saying that they did. He allowed 106 yards in the first half. They weren't bottling him up. This wasn't like some of the other games where he only had, under 40 yards rushing in the first half, like last week. That's not what this was. However, coming up, drive number 4, 4 drives in. Ashton Jeanty hasn't had a major impact other than going ahead for that first touchdown, but he does on drive number 4. Breaks an outside run for 31 yards, powers ahead. Should have gotten a foul on Nevada. There was a suplex after the play was long dead. Should have had, again, that contributes to the rivalry nature of this one, the back and forth between the players there. Madsen runs down to the goal line, takes a huge hit right on his throwing arm. And I am screaming at my TV, you're at the 3, run it with Ashton Jeanty. He's already had a huge impact on this drive, a 31-yarder. He is feeling the momentum, the energy, the limelight, the heat of the spotlight is on him. Give him the ball. It's second down at the 3 and let him power this in. And why? The worst call that you can possibly make is when you are at the 3-yard line, have a stacked box defensively, and your quarterback has just taken a hit on his throwing arm, a big pop. That is the worst call that you can make in that circumstances. I'm not saying you should always power ahead. There's been times when they have rolled out, they've thrown the tight end, roll out pass, or the breakaway screen. They've thrown those and it's worked. I'm not saying you don't go for that in a normal circumstance, but after your quarterback has taken a pop on his arm, I was thinking they better not throw that ball, because Maddox Madsen popped up quick, but you feel that stinger in your throwing arm, and it impacts you the next play. It impacts your decision-making, impacts how quickly you get the ball away, and it impacts the power that you throw that ball with. I said, do not throw this pass. They snap the ball. They don't hand it to Ashton Jeanty. The minute they did that, I knew it was an interception. He didn't release the ball yet, but I knew that was going to be a pick. And guess what? He threw an interception, goes to break, comes back. It's been ruled incomplete. But Boise State got a massive lucky break there. The next play, third down, They do what they should have done the game before, the drive before, the play before, and they handed Ashton Jeanty run in for a touchdown. And Ashton Jeanty takes over from that point out. Boise State does have to punt on drive number 5. I think that was a bad decision. It was 4th and inches. You got Ashton Jeanty in the backfield. I know that you have limited time left, but you don't want to give Nevada an opportunity in this. You punt that ball away, give it into their hands of their offense. They're going to take advantage of that. It's a rivalry game. 4th and inches, go for the first down. They don't. They do punt the ball away. It does end in a Nevada touchdown soon after that. But drive number 6 to end it, Ashton Jeanty grinds it out, gets the 2 key first downs, and finishes this game with 200+ yards rushing. So grading this overall Boise State offensive performance, some really strong moments, some really down moments, a roller coaster across the board. And not just in the passing game, Ashton Jeanty fumbling the ball as well. A couple of drops in the backfield for him, but also making up for it with the long breaking runs. This, again, was a up and down game. Boise State offense at times looking unstoppable, and at other times looking like they couldn't do anything right. Overall, the rivalry game definitely showing up in this matchup. Again, if you see this score, 28-21, and you don't believe this is a rivalry, as a fan, this is going to be a really tough spot for you because you just saw Boise State come up against a terrible Nevada team and almost lose. And you got to be questioning things. And what is going on? What's wrong with the program? Is it that we got a little bit too high up on our horse with the number 12 ranking, got a little too secure in our position? You know, what caused this loss? So if you don't consider this to be a rivalry, you're shocked by this result. And looking at this team and going, man, I don't know if they can win a playoff game. However, if you look at this game as an exception, which it was an exception for Boise State. It's not how they've played this season. You have to wonder why. And the reason why should be right in front of everybody's eyes, that this is a rivalry game. This is a massive rivalry game. Again, the players clearly felt that. The coaches definitely felt that. Again, most of them remember, or not maybe most of them, but there are players on the staff that remember the tough games of the past for Boise State. A lot of players on this team have grown up Boise State fans, especially the Idaho products, and they definitely know about and remember that game. And for the fan base, the environment in the stadium, the fan base came ready to support, and you could tell that this was a fan base that wasn't going to quit on their team. They never have this season, but there was a little bit of extra energy there. It felt so, at least watching. Maybe it was just because it was much better broadcasting than usual. But you could tell a little bit of an extra edge in the fan base because this game means something, and that's why the overall score was this close. That's why the passing game had its off-night performance. Again, anomaly for Madsen, anomaly for Boise State. This is not how Boise State is going to perform going forward. It's not how they've performed going back. So if you're trying to draw any conclusions about Boise State's potential from this matchup as an overall unit, you're not going to find any, because this was a game that if that team that they played tonight had been anybody other than Nevada, this would not have been the result that we saw. This would have been the dominant performance that we've seen all season long for Boise State. But because it was Nevada, this was a close game. So offensively, you have to consider that a little bit, at least from a fan perspective, as far as hope for the season. We're going to see a very different Boise State offensive performance next week for sure. However, grading this one fairly, C+. C+ performance, especially with the struggles in the passing game. Running game strong, but C+ performance overall. Now, defensively for Boise State, 21 points looks pretty good. It does. Put 21 points for Boise State allowed, looks pretty good. However, the actual game tells a little bit of a different story. We're going to look at positives in this one as well, just like we did with the offense. But there were a lot of negatives, and there were some, just like circumstances went Boise State's way in the passing game, interceptions that were not interceptions because of circumstances. There were some plays in this Boise State defense that if a couple of things don't go their way, you're looking at a Nevada team that's probably got 35 points and wins this game by a score in this matchup. Now, that's not to say, again, there were positives in this one. There were a lot of really strong performances. Just to shout out some players before we kind of dig into this. Benefield, 8 tackles, had some key open field moments. Mar McCoy, I thought he played a really strong game. He's been kind of that step-up leader for the Boise State secondary. 6 tackles, couple of key passes broken up. Roddy Robinson had some really key moments for him. Tackle for loss and 5 tackles. And then Jaden Version-Morgan, we're going to talk about him a little bit as we go through this game. But 3 tackles, a sack, 2 tackles for loss, and a forced fumble this was a big game for him. Another second big game. I mean, he's had several games this season that have been huge. Last week, though, was one of his best performances, and he kind of followed that up in this week as well, being the biggest impactor on that defensive line, stepping up again across from Rod Hassan. He's been one of the biggest step-up players of the year for Boise State. So there definitely were some strong performances in this one, and early on, Boise State started off really strong. I mean, you've got Jaden Vergemorgan starts off the game with a sack there, forces a punt, and then the next play, he forces a fumble, a negative 10 yards for Nevada. They recover that ball, but they end up being forced into a punt because of the lost yardage. However, after the momentum shifts, the biggest part of the team that's going to pick up on a big play defensively, it's going to be the offense. They're going to key off of the momentum shifts. They're going to feel that. You're going to see the momentum shifts are going to be most apparent on the offense. And it was. The momentum shifts, the turnovers for Boise State show up huge for Nevada offensively. And they're able to break an outside run, deep outside run, and then Lewis with a Kaepernick-esque run. Another part of this game that just brought back those feelings and emotions from 2010. Lewis shakes and bakes, breaks 2 tackles in the backfield, runs it up the middle for a touchdown. Looked very similar to some of the runs that Kaepernick had in 2008 for sure versus Boise State. That was kind of his specialty. His feet control was just so good. He was so good in the open field with the run. And so that, again, and maybe I'm just viewing the game through my lived perspective and experience. But I know a lot of Boise State fans, when they saw that run, it awoken some feelings, especially with the changing momentum of the matchup at that time. So Boise State defense allows that play, allows that run, as Nevada is able to get some momentum on their side. However, next drive, Boise State gets it back, but it wasn't necessarily because of Boise State's performance. Again, you look at the next drive, they recover a fumble, but it was an unforced error. Nobody hit the runner. He just dropped the ball. Boise State able to jump on top of it. Notarani, who he also had a big game in this one, 5 tackles. 5 tackles, a tackle for loss, and a fumble recovery. But Boise State, a ball bounces their way. And again, this is another element that makes me think back to that 2010 game, because if you remember that game, there were a lot of fumbles in that game that bounced and somehow always ended up perfectly in the hands of the Nevada players. Boise State forced several fumbles in that game, and I don't remember them recovering many, if any, of those balls. And so this could have been a circumstance where the ball bounces the wrong way. I know some people were saying that Boise State had some balls bounce their way tonight, and that's why they won. Now, that's partially true, but it makes up for a 2010 game where they had balls that did not bounce their way, did not end up in fumble recoveries, even on unforced errors, did not end up on fumble recoveries, and Boise State lost. And so again, a little bit more redemption moment for this Boise State program, historically, not necessarily this team itself, but from a historical sense, being able to jump on those, and Boise State's able to get a fumble recovery. But the drive next time, again, the up and down, and I know I said I wasn't going to go drive by drive, and we're not going to go through every one, but just to kind of to show some of not just the roller coaster elements of this matchup, but also the overall perspective for this Boise State defense. Drive number 5. They run a flea flicker on us. We fall prey to the trick plays. Every team really kind of that we play, especially if they have that chip on their shoulder and they don't have a lot left to play for, you can kind of guarantee a trick play is going to come out, because it feels good to score a trick play against Boise State with their history in that department. A little bit like showing up for the master of your field. And so trick play, flea flicker, ends up in a touchdown from a 4th and 1. And Boise State, it is not in a good spot. They're going into the second half 14-14 against a team that they were supposed to beat by 23.5 points. That was the line right before kickoff. They were supposed to beat them by 4 scores, and they're tied going into the half. However, drive number 1, Nevada doesn't capitalize. They have a drop pass, a deep ball. Again, statistically for Boise State, they give up 319 yards of offense, 232 yards passing, 87 yards rushing. But this could have been much worse. This could have been 300 plus yards of offense. Potentially there, especially if they're able to keep that drive alive. Nevada drops a pass, and then drive number 2, Boise State is able to do some good things. Freely is able to not freely, but the Boise State defense is able to bow up and stop Lewis on a 3rd and short, and Jaden Vergemorgan again has a big moment, some good key moments here. They're able to pop a ball up in the air and force a punt. But then drive number 4, Nevada goes all the way down to the goal line. They have a couple of huge plays. Max Teach gets a big sack, but they allow a long pass underneath. It's not a long throw through the air, but a long pass through the ground. Just a short route across the middle, right up, allow a 4th and 1 conversion. And Nevada is set to score right there to bring this within a 1-score game. I believe it would have been at that point. They are ready to score and change how this game goes forward. Boise State would have been under massive pressure, and they didn't go ahead and just score the next drive after that. That would have been a very difficult moment for Boise State in this game. It would have changed the tide of where we end up going with the final result, possibly pushing into overtime. However, at the goal line, unforced error, bad exchange, ball is fumbled, and Boise State jumps on top of it. Jeremiah Irby jumps on top of the ball. And Boise State had a couple things break their way. And Boise State is able to end this game with a win, despite a deep touchdown allowed on the last drive for Nevada there. Boise State comes away 28-21, but this was not a strong defensive performance. And again, I think Boise State's secondary has turned a page. I think they are better than we've seen them at the beginning of the season, but they looked off tonight. This Boise State defense overall, they struggled at times to stop the running game. I know only 87 yards rushing. Some of that is sack yardage. But at times in this game, they really struggled to slow Nevada down, and a couple of things broke their way. But again, that is not reflective of this Boise State defense. The Boise State defense is not regressing. This is not what we're going to see next week. But this is a rivalry game. Nevada came to play. So unfortunately, even though they only allowed 21 points, defensively for Boise State, going to have to be a B- overall. I think that's still fair. I think it was a strong game. 2 sacks, 8 tackles for loss, 2 fumbles recovered, a forced fumble that was not recovered, but a big lost yardage there. They stepped up. At times, but the key element, most times Boise State has won these games because they've allowed some bend but don't break, but they've stepped up when it mattered most. They've made the big plays. In this case, it wasn't so much the Boise State defense stepping up when it mattered most on those short goal line type situations, on 4th down. It wasn't Boise State stepping up big that won them the game. It was Nevada missing opportunities, whether it was dropped passes or most obviously just unforced errors, fumbling the ball away when they had every opportunity to score or maintain a drive going. So Boise State getting a lucky break here defensively that allowed them to go out and win this game. And that kind of takes us over to the special teams because when you talk about lucky breaks, there was a big one that could have changed, again, the momentum of this matchup. Now, overall, just looking at some of the key players here for special teams, Joan Dalmas, no field goals attempted. Thank goodness this game didn't come down to any field goals. Joan Dalmas would have been able to make them. That would have been nice. But the heart throbs of Bronco Nation, the heart pounding would have been, you'd have heard it in every county around the stadium. James Ferguson Reynolds, strong game for him. 5 punts under pretty strong pressure. They were actually coming after that ball pretty consistently. Got everyone away. 41-yard average, 2 inside the 20, and a long of 46. So got to be able to punt his number there. So strong performance overall for James Ferguson Reynolds. In the first half for Boise State, this was a good performance. I was going to give them a pretty solid grade there. If you just look at the first half, 29-yard return for Dylan Riley. Caples has a good job of corralling the punts that he does go after, as a 10-yard return there. Bates has a 20-yard kick return. Benefield had a big tackle on a punt right off the bat, being able to get the punt returner down. And they had another, again, great punt there to end the first half, pinning Nevada inside the 15. However, second half was nightmare fuel. This was a complete reversal in the second half for Boise State special teams department. Dylan Riley, who has played really well, he actually got to come in to spell Ashton Jeanty at one point. So I love that they're working him into the offense. This is a player with a ton of potential. But off night for everybody, defensively for Boise State, for Maddox Madsen, for Ashton Jeanty fumbling a ball. Everyone had off night moments. And Dylan Riley has an off night moment. Muffs the kick return. First kick return to open the drive when the game is tied, when all the momentum is in Nevada's court. They recover that ball. They're inside 10. They score. This game changes drastically. Boise State may have been able to come back out and score, and the mental fortitude of Maddox Matson in that 95-yard drive may have been on display, but it would have been to tie the game, and it would have been different. It would have been a different environment. But two Nevada players had every opportunity to secure the ball, and it just slips through their fingers and out of bounds. Almost identical moments to some of the things we saw in 2010. Boise State, the benefactor this time, the beneficiary of those mistakes, and the ball goes out of bounds, and nothing happens. Boise State goes on a 95-yard drive and scores, but there were so many moments in this game. If a ref doesn't make a bad call, if a player is able to secure an interception going out of bounds, if there aren't two unforced fumbles that Nevada throws away, if they are able to recover, this game was a classic, not in a way you wanted it to be. This was a true rivalry performance, and man, am I glad that we are moving to the Pac-12, and our days of playing Nevada are numbered just like the Vandals of the past. We will not have to face them ever again, and it's not because we can't beat them, because we consistently do, just like when we were playing versus the Vandals. However, Nevada's not a team that I look forward to playing. It's a rivalry game, but I don't look forward to it. I do enjoy beating them, but it's not a game that you want on your record, because it's probably not going to look good, because most years Nevada's not that good, so a win's not going to look that good for you, but they can always potentially beat you, and things that shouldn't happen, that don't happen in any other game, they happen versus the Wolfpack, and that was one of them. And luckily for Boise State, they got the ball back, or went out of bounds. And then Caples, on the next ball that Boise State gets on a punt return, Caples muffs it. Cole Miller, I mean, you're going to give the hammer to someone in this game. Give it to Cole Miller. That was a huge moment. Is able to jump on it, maintain possession for Boise State instead of giving the ball to Nevada on their side, on Boise State's side of the 50. That was a game-winning moment right there. And then Boise State gets a personal foul, again showing there was a little bit of a chippy kind of fighting there in the end zone. I mean, not like we've seen versus some other programs, but it was chippy. It was definitely chippy. And that was one of them, and Boise State gets a penalty that's assessed on the kickoff. The kickoff does not go very deep. Boise State seemed to struggle kicking it deep at times this season. That was one of them, goes to the 21. There's a 33-yard return, 48-yard kick return, takes the ball to the 33, and then Nevada is set up. And luckily, Boise State is able to recover from that moment. But that was another opportunity there for Nevada. They had every opportunity to go down and score, and I believe that was a drive that they ended up fumbling on. And then Boise State did redeem themselves in the final special teams play of the game by recovering an onside kick that was actually kicked a little bit short. But overall, for this Boise State special teams, this is going to be a C- performance, because that second half, ball doesn't bounce your way a couple of times, you lose the game again, in part because of special teams. It's a little bit of a regression. We saw some regressions last week. I thought there was a little bit more of just experimenting by Stacy Collins with a lead, but there were some issues. There was also a 25-yard kick return that for Nevada that went out to the 32, because it was also kicked a little bit short. Boise State struggled. They struggled to cover the kick again. They were pretty good at covering the punt return. They did have a long punt return that was called back for holding, but Boise State had some regressions in special teams, and I want to believe that just again like the secondary regressing a little bit, like the passing game showing issues, that it was because of the rivalry. That will definitely be one, because that's a little bit more of a consistent trend throughout the season to keep an eye on going forward into next week. All right, so finally here, and this has been a long review, but this was probably the one of the most important games of the season from a national perspective. Losing this game on the national television, you can't hope that the voters weren't watching, because they were definitely watching this one. Losing this game, especially with everything that it meant, and against that team, would have been a crushing, soul-wrecking, devastating blow. And so I think it is important to go into it a little bit more in depth. And when you have a game that overall is mostly negative, and I think for a large part this game gave that impression, I think it is more important to spend time going through it so that you do call out the negative plays and fully address them, get down to the roots of why they happened, and making sure that they're fixed for the future. But you also want to spend a little bit more time to call out the positives, because they we focus as a human race, we focus on the negatives, and especially the Boise State fan base, with what we've gone through the last few years, we've gotten used to focusing on the negatives because, to be honest, there were a lot of them. So I think it is important to really delve into the negative, to the plays overall, to the performance overall, and pull out the positives and spend a little bit more time bringing the full game into perspective, not just the negatives, but the positives as well, and how they blended together for a positive result, which was a win, even if it wasn't the win we wanted. Finally here, keys to the game, Ashton Jeanty, A+. They definitely made him a key priority. 3 runs right off the bat, 34 carries. He looked strong in this game, and he was definitely a player that they knew the national perspective was on him, and they also needed him to win, and he stepped up big, and they emphasized him the way that they needed to in both the run and the passing game. Key number 2, option. Boise State ran the option, I believe, 3 times, if I was counting correctly, right there towards the end of the game for a final first down conversion, or one of the plays of the last drive. Max Madsen's run. There was another opportunity where he could have pitched, and he kept it instead, and so they ran the option a few times, maybe 4 or 5 times in this game. 3 that definitely stick out in my head, but I'm kind of remembering a few more now as I'm talking about it. They were actually working that into the offense. I love to see it. This is a Boise State offense that is, in some aspects of the running game, gotten a little bit stale. I know that people are complaining about the running up the middle. Now, the running up the middle does open up the opportunities outside, which we saw later in the game. And we did see early in the game, when Boise State hadn't really established the run up the middle, that Ashton Jeanty wasn't having a ton of success out there. And he did have a negative 4-yard loss running it outside early on. So, I mean, I think Dirk Cutter, for the most part, has a solid plan for the running game, but something that Boise State could incorporate that would definitely expand its reach offensively, and definitely the looks that you're getting, give Ashton Jeanty some more opportunities in space, would be the option. And so I'm going to give that a solid B+ performance. I think Boise State was working to incorporate that, something they've been working on the practice field, into their offense. And then key number 3, return game. Boise State had some good moments. Dylan Riley had a nice return. He had a bad moment, but he also had a nice return. I want, again, to remember the good moments as well as the negatives. Bates, they're working in some new faces. He hasn't returned a ton of kickoffs. I think that might have been his first kick return of the season. He looked good. And Boise State is finding ways to get these fast, explosive players. Both of those players, by the way, guys that I said could have a role in the kick return because of their tape that we saw over the offseason as they were brought into the program. Boise State is working to get more explosive in the kick return and in the punt return. Boise State was definitely had an emphasis to their detriment, at least once, when they muffed a punt return there with Caples, but they were definitely emphasizing trying to return the ball and had one good 10-yard return. So overall, even though there definitely was a major negative moment in the return game, I'm still going to give it a B+ performance overall because there were some good moments and the intentionality, I think, is there. If Boise State continued to emphasize and work on that, that could be that final key, that one piece that, not counting this game, but consistently through the season, Boise State's fixed most of their other problems. That's the one element that they still haven't quite turned the corner on. I think there was an intentionality of trying to address that today. So overall, for the offense, defense, special teams, the keys to the game, this was a somewhat disappointing performance. If you were expecting a blowout win, this was a very disappointing performance. It depends on what perspective you came into this. If you watched my preview video and took what I said to heart, then you were somewhat prepared for this matchup. I know that Sanford was echoing the same things on Ball Talk, so if you watched, which you should, it's the best program out there for Boise State fans, Ball Talk with the Sanford and Johnny on Bronco Nation News. I'll put a link to it if you've never seen it before. I'm sure nobody is missing out in that element. I'm sure everyone has seen it at least once, but you should make that part of your weekly viewing. It's incredible stuff. But if you watched my channel, if you watched Bronco Nation News, you watched those programs, you would have been prepared for this, and you're now coming out of this with the excitement of a win and maybe some negative feelings from some of those missed opportunities, and just wishing it could have been more dominant on a national stage. But if you're coming through this game, again, thinking that this was going to be a blowout and you didn't get the blowout, you have a lot. And if on top of that, you don't view Nevada as a rivalry, you probably have a lot of negative feelings about this matchup. And so I hope that working through this review, we've been able to delve into some of those. But if you still have outstanding feelings on this performance that we need to get into, let's put it in the comments below, and I want to have that discussion with each and every one of you. So thanks so much for watching over the end. Let me know your thoughts on this video, on how I say Nevada wrong, whatever you want to talk about in the comments below. Thanks so much for watching. Make sure you like, subscribe. Looking forward to the upcoming preview for next week's game. Make sure you guys subscribe so you don't miss out on that. Thanks so much for watching as always, and go Big Blue!